All right, what's going on, everybody? So, I'm just gonna kind of show you kind of our process that we're using to stain our bins. So obviously this bin's got a cutout here. So that's what we've been offering our customers now, because we had one lady that ordered some of the smaller bins, and she wanted it notched down for some smaller dogs. So some people have ordered the bigger bins now with the notches, so we're just continuing that process. And honestly, it's probably a good idea for us, because we can sell the bigger bins for smaller dogs instead of having to making the smaller bins for the little dogs. I mean, we're still going to sell the smaller bins because people still want them for their little dogs. But it's just a nice feature, and we're basically selling it 3 options. So you have a full face like this, where it's all 3, and then we'll do a single notch, so it's just this top rung gets notched out like this, and then the double notch, so it's all the way down and it just has a single bar in the bottom. And this just allows for smaller dogs to be able to get at their toys in there. And I'm thinking of maybe making these or making a crate similar to this, but maybe not with this 3rd rung up here to fit like small dog beds, and then we'll just do the single notch out like that as another option for people to buy smaller kind of crate deals. Because I have right here, that's a raised dog bed for my mom for her 100-pound lab, but so that's going to have a dog bed that's just going to sit in there. But my mom had mentioned that people might want something similar to this for dog beds. But moving on to staining, might be running out of stain here, but so what we've been using, we've basically been using 2 different types of stain. We've been using this dark walnut from Varathane. It's their premium wood stain. This stuff's pretty nice because it goes on pretty thick and it dries fast. So on the can here it says dries in an hour, which is nice if you're wanting to do a lot of projects in a rapid amount of time and kind of batch things out like what we've been doing. So we like this stain. And then when we made those smaller bins a couple weeks ago, the customer wanted a gray stain, and they ended up picking this, which is a classic gray. And that looks like this when it's all done and dried. And at first, me and my wife, we didn't really like it, but now that we've kind of used it a few times, we're actually starting to like that maybe a little bit more than this dark walnut. But we still have people that like this because it comes out with a nice finish on it, so it's not too bad. But basically all we do when we stain is we have little foam brushes somewhere in my disaster workbench, but we just basically wipe it on with the foam brushes, get all the nooks and crannies, and then we come through with a rag and we'll just wipe it off. And with this stuff, it's a single coat and you're good to go. We did buy some Minwax dark walnut. That's like a regular penetrating stain like that gray is. The only problem is that you need to do basically at least 2 coats to get the same look as this stuff does. So for us, we're probably just going to stick with this and just get it in a bigger can. Just because for us, you know, time's of the essence. So being able to get the same look and finish in 1 coat versus 2 is obviously a lot better. And since they cost about the same, might as well just pick up this. So I'm going to set you up and I'll kind of walk you through our staining process here. All right, so we got kind of all of our stuff going. I'm going to wear some nitrile gloves just to keep the stain off my fingers. And then we got just a plain rag here. We buy it in these big bags of rags. It's just basically cut up t-shirts. It's like 20 bucks for this bag, and they do it by the pound. So I think it's an 8-pound bag of just cut up shirts, and you just get random sizes, and you can cut these down if you want them smaller. So like I said, we're going to use our dark walnut stain. Always shake it up, even if you were just using it, you know, the other day. Doesn't hurt to just shake it up a little bit, make sure it's all mixed. And we'll take our screwdriver and we'll pop the lid. And we're currently out of our 2-inch foam brushes, which is what we've been using, so I'm just gonna have to suffer with this 1-inch brush, which isn't the end of the world. All we do is just kind of soak the tip, about an inch or so, and then you just go through and you just start kind of wiping it on. You don't have to really worry about it being too thick or too much, because you're going to wipe off the excess anyway. But at the same time, you don't want to be really overdoing it, because then you could be spilling and making an unnecessary mess. But you just want to kind of get into all the nooks and crannies, get a good even finish. And the issue with the plywood, or not really an issue, but something you want to keep in mind when you're staining the plywood, is to make sure you're getting the ends of the plywood good and covered, just because that's going to soak in a little bit more stain than the face of it will, and that's no different than regular wood. So it's just something to kind of keep in mind when you're using plywood or any other kind of composite material. So if you're using MDF or particle board, it's going to be the same kind of process and same kind of things you'll run into, where the end, where that's kind of the particle board, where it's all like the end grain of it, you'll find that the stain or whatever finish you're using is going to soak in a lot more. So you're just going to want to make sure that you get a little extra in there to get a good solid coating. I'm trying not to make too much of a mess on the table here, just because it kind of ends up being a pain to kind of clean things up. And you want to do your best to get everything covered, even on the other sides where you don't think the customer will see it, but it's that extra little steps you take in quality really helps sell that product that you're trying to make. I watch a guy who is a handyman, and he always says, do the work that your customer expects, and then take, go another step or two above that. So whatever, price you're selling or whatever product you're selling, do what you think your customer would expect for the price that they're paying, and then move, go past it a step or two to kind of go that extra mile and give them that little bit of extra quality. And that way they'll be more willing to not only buy from you again, but also recommend you to their friends and their family, and help kind of grow your business at the same time. Because at the end of the day, that's kind of what we're doing this for, is to turn this into, at least a profitable hobby, where, it might not be our primary job, but it'll at least, pay for itself and help us, make a car payment, or, we can use this to be like our renovation budget. So any money or profit that we're making off of doing this, we can turn around and use that to fund projects for the house, like renovating our basement or a bathroom or a kitchen remodel or something like that. Or in our case, we're trying to buy land. So using, the money we're making here, doing all of this, turning that around and putting that away in the savings account, so that way we can build up that money and eventually buy some land and move up to the countryside, and maybe continue this business out there, and grow it even more, and actually turn it into something where that's what we do as our full-time jobs, is make wood products, such as these crates or something else. I would really like to kind of grow this into something where I can make furniture. I've made some small pieces of furniture in the past. Like I have a coffee table that sits in the garage in here that I made a few years ago. It's not the greatest and prettiest thing on the planet, but it's it's not bad. And then I also have an end table that I made like 3 or 4 years ago when we first moved into the house. And again, that's pretty basic, but it's somewhere that I started. And you know, making furniture is where you can really kind of make a lot of money doing woodworking crafts, just because the amount of time and effort that you put into a piece of furniture can really come out at the end because of, you know, especially doing custom work, like even these crates, you know, this little bit of work that we're doing to stain and cut and make them look nice, that all adds up into that cost that our customers are paying, and you can just extrapolate it out. So like we sell these large crates for $40 a piece, and we've got a pretty good business going, and we've just started. And if you imagine, you know, this doesn't take all that long to do. If you know, make a bigger piece of furniture, like even for instance this worktop that we're using, you know, I originally made this to be a patio furniture, like a patio table top, and it kind of just morphed into being my little work table in the garage here. But if I was able to put, you know, some legs on it and, you know, start selling that, and then maybe make some chairs to go along with it, I could easily sell, you know, a solid work, you know, patio table like this with 4 chairs for $500-600, no problem. So being able to, you know, make simple projects, but turn them into, you know, nicely made and well-crafted projects can really make a big difference. Because it's not exactly about being, you know, the greatest craftsman on the planet. You don't need to know exactly what you're doing or have some big fancy equipment or all these, you know, fancy tools. But being able to, you know, make something nice out of, you know, just regular hardware store lumber like Home Depot, Menards, Lowe's, and turn that into something nice. Because like this table is just made out of 2x6s that I cut down and I trimmed the edges off. Because like when you get normal 2x material, it's got a rounded edge. So all I did was just ripped it down, ripped those edges off on my table saw, and then just glued it together, and, you know, put some deck stain on it. And I've had this in the garage now for I think like 2 years now, and it's been a solid worktop. I've used and abused it. It's gotten a lot of abuse here lately with all the staining and stuff we've been doing on it. But it works great. It's solid, it's flat. I like using it as a worktop just because of the fact that it's flat, and I don't have to worry about trying to get things lined up on it, because as long as the surface is clean and I don't have any globs of glue or any big gouges missing in it, it works perfect. And I might have to make, thinking about making a big workbench, and I'm debating whether or not to make it out of plywood for the worktop, or doing something similar to this and making it out of 2x6s or some other regular dimensional lumber, and then just gluing it together, just so I can have another work surface instead of using, you know, a small little workbench. Alright, so we got the front all kind of stained, and we're going to go through and we'll just wipe this down and turn it this way so you guys can kind of see. But it's nothing too complicated. You just go through and just take your rag or a paper towel if you don't have a rag, and you're just going to wipe the surface down. And your goal is to just try to get that excess stain off, because you don't want it to be too dark, because the customer at the end of the day is buying a wood product, so they want to be able to see that wood grain. So by wiping the stain, That's what you're pulling off, that extra stain, so they can actually see what's underneath and get that wood grain to show. And with this stain, it doesn't really seem to matter how long you let it sit on the wood, or on the plywood in this case. You tend to get a pretty even finish, which is kind of nice. With other stains, with like the penetrating stains, you definitely want to let it sit. If you let it sit, the longer you let it sit, the darker the stain will finish. So with that gray stain that we have on the other bins that I showed you earlier, those ones, that's a penetrating stain. So the longer you let that stain sit on the wood, the darker it'll tend to be. So something like that, it's kind of dependent on what your customer is asking for, or how they want their finish. A lot of times if they don't care, or they don't really know exactly what they want, you can kind of guide them. And by having lots of pictures of your different products or different things that you've made in the past, that really helps kind of give them an idea. Because I know, for example, like my wife, she's really good at doing projects like this, but her one problem is she can't really, she has a hard time visualizing what the end product will look like. So on something like this, you know, I can visualize what it'll look like stained and fully put together with all the cutouts and everything in my head, no problem. But for her, she's just not a visual thinker like that, so she has a hard time kind of visualizing what this will look like. So then once I make something, like I'll make a test piece of what I have in my head, and I'll finish it, stain it, and let her kind of look at it. And then usually from there, she's like, oh, okay, that looks awesome, that's perfect. So it's just a matter of kind of, for us, we just kind of have to work together and know how each other works. So for her, she can just be like, oh, you know, somebody wants this, can you make that? And I go, yeah. I take a few seconds or a few minutes, think about it in my head, and I'm building something and then figuring out how I actually can build it and what materials, what tools I might need, if I need to buy something, you know, like a router bit or a different drill bit or whatever tool it might be to complete, you know, whatever idea she has in her head. And then from there, it's just a matter of, you know, is this something that we want to try and make, or is this something that we'll push off till later, until, you know, we get more demand for something like that, or until we get a little bit more money if it's something that's going to require a lot of tooling, like buying like a planer, a routing table, sanding table, something like that. So it's all just kind of like a give and take with everything, on what you want to do and how fast you want to try and grow your business. And like I said, for us, we're not kind of jumping in with both feet right now. We're just trying to kind of test the waters and see how this goes. Since we're both working, I mean, I work 50, 60 hours a week driving a truck, and my wife, she's a server at a restaurant here in town. So she's been kind of touch and go with work lately because of the whole pandemic going on. And so this has kind of driven her to want to do a lot of this crafting stuff more and building these crates and kind of making, you know, keeping herself busy at home. And so that's kind of why we've started doing this a little bit more. But I think even after everything kind of goes back to normal here, hopefully soon, we'll probably still keep at this, because as long as we can kind of keep our current system going, it's working out pretty good, where I'll come home from driving at night, I'll come out here in the mornings, work on, you know, building something, like for example, like these crates, I'll come out here and work on them for a couple hours every morning, get them built and ready for her, and then she, as I'm sleeping or going to bed, she'll come out and stain them and do her stenciling and kind of do all her side of the work. And that way we can kind of kill two birds with one stone, so we're not kind of jumping on each other's toes while we're working. We're both able to work as efficiently as we can, and she's also making shirts. So she's doing the custom shirts where she's got a Cricut machine, and that's how we get our stencils for the names and the paw prints and anything else that a customer might want on a crate like this, or something else that we might make in the future. So what she'll do is she'll get the design, whether it be, you know, something simple where it just says toys and the two paw prints, or if it's got a special name that somebody wants, and she'll make it up in her Cricut, cut out the stencil for it, and then the next day, usually while I'm sleeping or getting ready to go to bed, she'll come out here and start to work on the crates themselves by stenciling them and putting paint on it. And then usually within about a 2-day process. Usually it's 1 day of staining, and then another day where we stencil, and then usually by like that afternoon they're ready to go. So it's we've got it down to a pretty good system already, which is good. Especially like if in the future we decide to kind of, you know, we keep growing this and doing more and more. It's nice to have those little processes down of just the simple things like, you know, what's our time frame for building something like this? How long does it take to build, you know, a dozen crates? How long does it take to stain, you know, a dozen crates? How long does it take to put the stenciling on? You know, little things like that you don't really think about when you're doing onesie-twosie type projects, but then once you start getting into the bigger ones, where you're trying to batch out, you know, 12, 24, you know, 100 of these crates, you really want to know how long it's going to take you so you can kind of time manage yourself and kind of give your customers at the same time a little bit of an expectation, like, okay, well, you know, we have the materials for your crate, but we don't currently have the time because we didn't manage our time well, or we didn't expect this to take this long, or we didn't expect that to take that long. So by, you know, working out the little kinks here with the smaller projects, it's going to help in the future if we decide to kind of turn this into our full-time gigs, or in my case, you know, take a couple days off of work, or cut back on a couple days of work a week so I can do this more. Just that way we can continue to grow this side of what we do. Is, you know, we both seem to kind of like doing this. But I think that's all I got for you guys on this. I'll take some pictures of what it looks like when it's completely stained. And yeah, I'll catch you in the next one.